Good evening and welcome to tonight's committee meeting of the Finance Committee for the Lake Bluff Public Library. I call this meeting to order at 7:04 p.m. Do I have a volunteer to take minutes today?
I'll take minutes.
Matt, thank you.
Mhm.
So I call the meeting to order at 7:04. Next, I'd like to take roll call. Trustee Zaute.
Here.
Trustee Shaul.
Here.
And Trustee Shaul is attending in place of Trustee Meyerhoff. So with that, we do have a quorum. And I'd also like to say hello and welcome to our guest tonight, Lake Bluff Village Finance Director, Bettina O'Connell. Good evening, Bettina.
Good evening.
Thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
All right, the next item on the agenda is to review and approve the Finance Committee meeting minutes from January 23rd. It is attached to tonight's meeting invitation for the trustees, but I will also share it on screen here. If you'd like to take, if we need to, we can take a few minutes to review.
I'll motion to approve.
Okay. It's Matt. Do I have a second?
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The Finance Committee meeting minutes from January 23rd, 2023 have been approved. Thank you very much. All right. And so now I would like to move on to the next item of our agenda, which is a more informal budget presentation, but also discussion with Bettina O'Connell from the Village of Lake Bluff, the Finance Director. And before I pass it off to you, Bettina, I just want to set some context about why you're here and some of the reasons for that. So this all started when one of our staff members, Laurence, noticed that the library hadn't received any invoices from our accounting firm, Lauterbach and Amann, regarding medical insurance payments. She noted that there were months missing all the way back since July. And that started me digging into why that was. And I just want to acknowledge Bettina and how helpful she has been since I started, but especially with this really interesting situation. So as we started digging into this, I just want to share context. Lauterbach and Amann has gone through several staffing changes with relation to who our point person is at this accounting firm. I believe it's a total of 3 within the last, is it year?
No, that's right. Maybe a little bit over a year, but the last 2 for sure in the last 6 months or so.
Okay, thank you. And I mean, that is significant, but also that coupled with the fact that we didn't have a director. We had Katie Horner as our interim director for 7 months or so. And there was that the position of director was vacant for a significant amount of time. I think all of these situations combined to also my learning, my onboarding with the library. I've really only had about 2 months to kind of get my feet under me with understanding the spending trends month to month, understanding where we're going, preparing the budget for next fiscal year based on spending of this fiscal year. So all of this together, Bettina, I just want to acknowledge, has done a lot of research and preparation of reports that are going to help the library with not only budgeting or spending for this year, but also budgeting for next year. And so I wanted to share that as context, and then I'm going to pass it off to you, Bettina, in terms of just explaining what we've learned and what the previous process with my predecessor was, or and go from there.
Sure.
And let me know when you'd like me to share any of those documents. I'm ready to share my screen anytime.
Okay. So I can speak to the process briefly, and I'll be honest, I'm not sure that we really had a connective process as far as budget was concerned. I've never spoken with you all before on budget, and previous director would just really provide me the documents and also enter some of the numbers into our software so that they'd be ready for me to use in our big budget book, and that was pretty much the end of it. And as far as the expenses that Renee was talking about with regards to health insurance, so yeah, we use Lauterbach and Neiman as a replacement for the deputy or assistant finance director role that used to serve with Marlene. I don't know if you were familiar with that employee from before. So it's been 2 or 3 years since she's been gone, and we've replaced her with an outsourced accounting firm. And she would do all the reconciliations for the library and the various accounting pieces besides just booking the expenses. So that process, not to get too technical, but involves my receiving a bill, that bill getting posted, and part of that bill is from the health insurance co-op that we all belong to that gives the library employees their rates. And that bill, then a portion of it related to the library's expense gets booked to a due to line. And then the accounting process is to take that expense and charge the library for it in an invoice that accumulates with other expenses related to like life insurance, health insurance, IMRF expenses, anything that we would prepay on your behalf. So,
Bettina, quick question.
Yeah.
Is the health insurance, are we self-insured, or does
No.
Blue Cross Blue Shield cover the risk? So our payments are purely premium and are knowable in advance.
Right. So we belong to a health insurance pool. It's about 12 or 14 municipalities, and that life structure gets us some really good premium costs. And so the park district is in on the pool, the library is, there's several other communities. And yes, it's still a premium flat cost, but that cost is negotiated through a board where each municipality is represented on. So Village Administrator Joe Irvin is on that board. I sit on there with him. I'm not a voting member, but I do participate and hear what's going on as I administer the health insurance benefits on the village and library side. So we have some control, if you will, over the cost increases based on investments and trends in the market. So kind of yes and no, but we're not self-insured.
Okay.
The long answer. So where was I? So Lauterbach and Neiman then takes that information from the invoices that we pay related on your behalf for the various costs, and then charges the library with an invoice cumulatively for the month. And for some reason, the health insurance expense and the timing of the invoice, when I receive it, when it gets booked, when it gets to our warrant, to our board and paid through to yours, is a timing issue that doesn't ever align with when your board would see the expenses. So they have been booking a template number on a month-to-month basis that they've trued up at the end of the audit year. So that template number wasn't necessarily updated when Eric left and his family coverage changed, and we took on a different coverage with Renee and other changes throughout the year, or even rate changes. For example, the dental insurance actually went down. So there are things that weren't incorporated correctly in that template number. So having said that, the budget amount that was originally reported, and I don't know if you want to show the screen now, Renee, we can get into some numbers instead of.
Yeah, which one would you like to
So
go
let's
first?
do the insurance summary one that shows the estimate for 24 and then for 25 and
Okay.
where we're at in 23.
Let me get to that. The insurance summary tab,
Right.
just making sure I have the right one that you called it. Okay.
While you're doing that, Renee, Bettina, another quick question. Is
Mhm.
our insurance rate set for the calendar year, or is it set to the fiscal year? Municipal
So
fiscal year?
it's set on a calendar year basis. So I do a similar sheet for the village that I did for Renee this time around that lists all of our employees and the calculations we'll do, 8 months at one rate, 4 months at another, and do some assumptions based on where we think the trends are in the market. And I tend to use a 10% escalator for those 4 months that are part of the following fiscal, outlier months, because you never know. And if I'm wrong, well, great, but it doesn't usually ever exceed that 10% number for those 4 months. So originally on, I think the expenditure sheet that that Renee had looked at, we were budgeting $100,000 or so for expenses for year end. And based on the actual numbers and not the template that will true up at the end, I'm estimating you to come in at budget at 86,000.
And I'll just add here, this all happened like before and right as I sent that email. So I just want to acknowledge that like we were crunching the numbers and having these discussions this afternoon. So that is why there is a slight difference than what I emailed out. Because the number, if you look in our board packets, each month, the cost, the expenditure for medical insurance is pretty much the same. And that's that template number that Bettina is referring to, which, as Bettina is identifying, is most likely, very probable, over budget. And go ahead, Bettina, sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. Yeah, it is, because these numbers that I have on the sheet for you are actuals based on your actual employees or actual elections and the actual employer and employee costs. So I took it down to, the real numbers so that there's no guessing. And then the proposed allocation would then be based on the current rate and the estimated rate going forward. And then how I estimate the year for 25 for my employees, I did apply the same logic to yours, which still keeps you under the number that was originally projected for this year's budget. And that's also assuming no staffing changes, no one gets married and has because it's a pretty tight number of people in your employee pool. So one person's change could affect this number in a substantial way. But that's kind of how the health insurance went.
So another question. So looking at these 3 columns, why is only medical insurance reflected in the allocation 22-23?
So the allocation is a sum in 22-23 because you actually budget medical, dental, vision, and life all in one line, if you will. So for the years outward, I took actual live data and broke it out. So the blue line, the total at the bottom, is what you'll see on your budget number, because you summarize those 3 types of insurance and medical. Okay.
So if I remember correctly, in the fiscal year 22-23 budget line for medical, I think it's, or whatever, it's health insurance, and maybe it's those 3 things combined. I think it was 5 or 86. So I think what you're saying is for fiscal year 22-23, the actuals are not going to exceed the budgeted amount.
I don't believe so. No, not based on the actual numbers that I calculated. I mean, this is a budgeted number. It's going to be like 84 or 9. I mean, there's some change to it, but the budgeted number it should not exceed it. No.
Okay. And then for next fiscal year, 23-24, you're saying it might actually go down a little bit. That maybe that's the dental variation.
So that's because part of 23 included Eric at a higher rate for family coverage and Renee at a lower rate for employee only, and slight changes to dental. Life insurance stayed the same pretty much.
Okay.
And this is considering our staff as it is now. If we don't add any new staff or make a part-time or a full-time, anything like that, that's just with the existing staffing as it is.
Right.
And we had one library staff who had an addition to their family, at least the one that I know of. Is that contemplated in the premium? It must be for the premium for 23.
So the tiers are employee, spouse, or family. So if they were already designated a family, then an additional child will not change the cost. So I don't know that. If Renee, if you know something like that, I can certainly tweak the numbers and change it, or you can. Yeah.
And the other thing, and the reason I keep going back to the staffing, is that we've had a lot of conversations already about the staffing at the organization, and I want to have more conversations about that too. There's going to be money built into next year's salary line that could give us options, not only for adjusting the salaries, but if we wanted to add a part-time position, if we identify that need, we have that ability. But as it is now, I don't have any information that would indicate any further changes for the existing staff.
And like I said, these are proposed based on actuals. You could make an assumption or a choice to use a percentage of increase from that 86,000 that would give you the leverage to include some change. So you might want to say, you know, let's bump it up 2% from 86 and not do the actual number. I'm just giving you what the actuals are based on the people that I currently have in the pool.
And Bettina, if I heard you correctly, you have clearly a good view on what the 22-23 actuals are going to be on this line item for the library. And you've taken those actuals and you've added 10% in the proposed 23-24.
No, the 23-24 are actual. So kind of, yes, you're kind of right. So it's based on the premium cost for the 4 months left in the year that I know what it is. And then there is an escalator built in for the remaining months.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Same thing for 24-25. Then you run the first couple months, 4 months, right?
That one is just a flat increase because it's variable. I don't know exactly, and we don't put that on the budget yet anywhere. So it's just like informational, kind of a trend, so you can see where it's headed, and you know.
I just want to add too, without this collaboration or at least communication between myself and Bettina, I would not have known that the numbers in BSNA, our accounting software that I have access to, that Bettina has access to, I wouldn't have known that those numbers are just a placeholder number. We haven't paid any invoices as a library in that placeholder number yet. We pay actual cost, and so what we're seeing on our side in the software program is not reflective of what's actually spent. And so that's why, Bettina's already talked to me about how we want to talk to Lauterbach and Amann about how they should no longer use this this template number and process all of the expenditures live and the actual funding amounts. So that way I have a better ability to budget, not just this current year, but next year. I can work with Bettina on those actual numbers that we will see in BSNA. So all of this, I would say, is, good news. We should have prefaced it by saying that good news abound, but also it's going to increase my capacity to reflect, an actual expenditure each month at the board meeting, as opposed to it being a standard number that's really a placeholder and doesn't help anybody with any forecasting budget wise.
So I'm going to work with them to hopefully change that for your next month's report for sure. Yep.
So if we're, just so I understand the math, if we're assuming a 10% increase for calendar year over year, wouldn't that be $8,600 all in across the medical, dental, and life?
So it's a percentage, but then I also take into account who the actual employees are. And like I said, there's been a change, a pretty big one, because $2,600 would have been the premium for family for Eric. And now that's dropped to, $850.
Understood.
So let's spread that out, and you've changed the math. Yep.
And but to your point, Matt, my recollection of the February board packet and the number that was in BSA, it looked like we were running really hot.
Because those are
overspend.
Yes, and that's because in BSNA, we were only using that template number, which is much higher estimate than is actually going to be spent. So Lauterbach and Amann were determining a template number for us and inputting that into BSNA so that it looked like our budgeting was actually going to be overspent. But what they wanted to do, which Bettina is going to be asking, we both are going to be asking them to not do, what we want them to do is reconcile it month by month so that we have actual costs and actual numbers that we're presenting to the board, that I'm presenting to the board.
And so what you might see, which I can explain going forward, is because of the timing of when those invoices are received, when the village warrant is, when I pay the actual bill and cut the check, and then that expense becomes a due from the library, and then actually it ends up trickling down to you. The timing of all that could miss your reporting. So you may see months where it's not updated, and the following month it may be updated. So I would say look to that expense to be in arrears, which is better than having it be padded arbitrarily.
And that's actually how it had been for those 2 months this
Mhm.
fiscal year, that it read 0. I think it was
Mhm.
July and September, maybe I'm wrong. And if you were to look that following month, year to date, the amount that they had projected with that template number had been removed. So we were actually still on track to be spending or allocated that template number month by month. It just wasn't available to be in the report for when it was time for me to run the board packet. So now that I know this, and I also know the fact that this number is not necessarily a true number, going forward, we're going to make it so that it is a true number.
For sure.
So just so I can get this clear on the notes. So when we go through the reconciliation process, the templated number that Lauterbach gives us is based on just a 10% increase. It doesn't include the adjustments for employee elections or
Right.
any premium assumptions.
So they used an estimate based off the last month of the prior fiscal year. So whatever that insurance amount was based off the prior fiscal year, they would use that number. And there was a substantial change to your pool and to your costs, and that wasn't adjusted out in
Thank you.
the number they were posting. Because theoretically, you would assume, I understand why that logic would work, because if they actually had the actual employee base and I gave them the right number from month to month, there's not going to be a big change to your health insurance payment. It should be the same, barring, an employee change. So I never gave them that update. They didn't ask. And on the flip side, your bills weren't being, it was just a bunch of accumulated list of inefficiencies that we'll correct. Let's put it that way.
Hey, Bettina, how does it work? Let's say an employee decides to use the coverage provided by the library as the secondary coverage, not as their primary coverage. Is premium the same?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So from what I know of health insurance, if you opt to choose, I don't know that you can make a choice of it being secondary. It goes by the birth date. Whoever is covering the insurance would become primary. So if you had husband and wife that were both insured different places, whoever's birth date fell first in the year, I believe, would be the primary, and the other one could be secondary. The village offers an opt-out option. So if you actually just totally opt out and decline coverage, we pay you $1,200 or something for the year. But that would be the only option that someone could do, and you'd want to document that opt-out so that you don't get, charged with some sort of not providing them a benefit later. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
So this actually is really good timing for me, because now that I understand, and now that we have all the information, Bettina has all the information, we have all the information about actual costs spent, I can present you all as a committee a draft budget for the next fiscal year. So we've been talking about this current fiscal year. I'm also trying to get as much information as I can to plan for next fiscal year. So now we have a better sense of what we can budget, or what we should budget for the medical insurance line. But I do want to just acknowledge and again thank Bettina, who did not have to run these reports at all, but did because of this situation. What she's also identified are estimates. And I just want to say this information is all based on actuals, and I don't know if my predecessor ever connected with Bettina. I'm seeing a head shake. Okay.
No.
About this. And again, I feel like this only increases my ability to be as transparent and efficient and accurate with the budgeting process for next year, to be able to give you these numbers. So we also can see what estimates are going to be for the FICA and the FICA line, and then as also the IMRF line. She also did a salary payout, which I'm going to talk, or expenditure list, and I'll talk about that in our later in the meeting. But I just want to highlight here, we have known numbers now for me to be able to provide an accurate budget, proposed budget for fiscal year 23-24. So that's what this one is. If you wanted to, I don't know, Bettina, did you have anything to say about this one?
No, I mean, it's pulling from your salary tab. So if you change a number on that end, it should do the math and pull for the right FICA Medicare number. And those all represent actuals based on the staffing.
So I've hidden columns A and B because those are staff names. But they're all, each one of these is salary regards to an individual staff person, and that's how the FICA is determined.
Right.
Okay,
And the
just
same,
as a point of order, Renee, I just want to let you know we are at 7:30. I know Matt has a hard stop at 8.
yep, giving you all the information. Do you have any other questions then for Bettina?
Just thank you. Appreciate
thank you,
your
Bettina.
digging
You're
into
welcome.
this to help us get some clarity and
Sure, no problem.
reassurance.
Yeah, no problem.
Bettina, thank you so much for being here tonight and giving your evening for this discussion.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, thank
you
you
at
so
the audit.
much.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Bettina.
see you at the audit. Okay, I'll talk to you, Renee.
Thanks, Bettina.
Bye-bye.
Yes, we'll
Sure.
talk.
Bye-bye.
Okay. So what I'm going to share next is the third version of the draft budget. I've attached it also to the meeting invite, but you have it here. What I do want to identify are the areas in red that are changed from the last time we met. And given tonight's conversation, I made some other updates as well. One highlight I do want to mention is given our ever increasing revenue for passport fees, I've increased our estimate for revenue to $20,000 for it will still be more than that, we anticipate, based on this year's revenue, but I've increased that allocation to $20,000. I've also addressed the increase in income that we continue to see month to month for our interest. So this is a very conservative estimate of revenue that we're receiving, we will receive for interest for next fiscal year. And then we discussed this in our last meeting, but we decided to reduce miscellaneous income down to $3,000. So that has been done here.
And Renee, do you have what they were increased from, just so I can include it in the notes?
From the last version of the budget?
Yeah.
I can give that to you. I can probably get that right now, actually. It's in a different document.
Yeah.
Okay, so share my screen one more time. Okay, version 2. So we're talking revenues. Passports, 18,000 to 20,000.
Okay.
Interest, 10,000 to 20,000. And again, this is very conservative based on interest earnings that we've seen this fiscal year. And then miscellaneous income, reducing that from 10,000 to 3,000.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Questions on the revenue draft budget? Okay.
What was that final, just real quick, what was that final number on the miscellaneous income? 30?
No, just
3,000.
3,000.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
so a reduction from 10,000 to 3. Go ahead, Bonnie.
No, I was holding up 3 fingers.
Oh,
Thank you.
that
I
was a
thought
question.
there's some numbers after the 3. Applying
Thank you.
precision, yeah.
All right. So expenditures. This is where within the last 24 hours, I've done like 3 or 4 or 5 different versions. So based on Bettina's numbers, this is my most recent version. And so I'll just go straight to the medical insurance one first, since that's based on our conversation. You can see here, there's that 86 I highlighted in yellow. That's the current fiscal year, or that's the current budget year. We can discuss if we think, given Bettina's estimates, if 100,000 is too much. I mean, it is based on her numbers. I also don't know if we would have, you know, they say generally if you add a staff member with insurance, it could be anywhere from 15 to 20,000 additional dollars. If you were to add a new full-time staff member onto your staff. I don't necessarily have that in plans right now, but this would give us the flexibility that we need in case we decided to do that, or if there were any changes of the existing organization. But that is what I've proposed here. And then I've adjusted the other numbers too. So I'll just start with giving you what the other medical insurance number was from the last version, Matt.
Thank you.
It's actually not that much different. So 95,000. So I increased it 5,000. I originally had increased it like much higher than that, but we don't have to do that. Looking at the librarian salary line. Context, Bonnie, I don't know if you were at these finance meetings, but we've talked a couple of times about salary benchmarking and adjustments that could be needed based on job descriptions and competitiveness in the industry. So these increases allow for a lot more flexibility. And here's where I'm going to share with you another not this one. Here, okay. Want to show you another tab from Bettina's spreadsheet. So I've hidden the names of staff, but what you see on the left side in this column are the actual salaries of staff members in our organization. I've estimated, not even with the inflation, but estimated a 6% increase for all staff for the proposed budget 23-24. Now, the way that I'm familiar with budgeting for raises, managers get often, you know, a percentage that they can select for each individual staff based on their achievements of the year. But I've just overestimated for everybody to see the number that we're coming up with. And so based on that, if we go with 6% increase based on salary of this fiscal year, we end up somewhere around 560,000. And so that is both the salary for the librarians and the salary for the staff. You know how they're broken up into 2 lines, and I wasn't sure why. Some people are identified as admin, and that's what this column is. And then some people are identified as staff. And so from that number, 566,214, looking at our budget numbers, we've got some room to play with. And so these 2 lines together, there's about 20,000, 25,000, this is estimate, between paying everybody's salary with that 6%. And there is a considerable amount extra for any adjustments that we decide to make in the fiscal year 23-24. So I wanted to identify that. Yeah, Bonnie.
No question. Okay. So first question is, the budget we're reviewing tonight, version 3, do the expenses hit the PTEL number? Do the year-over-year increases in expenses hit the PTEL number? For the whole thing, it's like a laddered up 30,000 foot
here.
view.
So if you look here, are you asking about the total?
Yes, I'm asking about the
Yep.
total revenue. Oh, sorry, expenses and revenue.
Yep. So here's the revenue tab, 1158707. Here's the expenditure tab, 1158707.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And
So-
then
Go ahead.
just specific to the salary numbers. So if you took 6% as your best estimate year-over-year increase, why is the budget spreadsheet showing 5 or 5.5?
Because there's more in there. There was a large amount of money that was unspent this fiscal year due to Eric's change. And so instead of removing that and delegating it out, we're keeping it there. And so the difference is not as much compared to
Got it.
the fact that we're doing 6%.
Okay.
And so if we look at the budget, so your estimate based on salary increase or compensation increases at 6% gets us to 566,000. And then that budget line is what, about $600,000,
Let me do
$400?
a quick add. I think it's no. So this is just going to be
Looks like 600, 357.
yeah, just over 6. Yeah,
Okay,
357.
got it.
Questions so far still? Differences from the last budget presentation I can share with you, Matt, if that would be helpful.
No, I think if you have it handy, that's
Yeah,
great. But
I do.
so just for my comments here or note taking, so the budget, that 600K, the additional about 34,000 allows for flexibility and additional compensation or add to staff.
Salary, add to staff, I'm really thinking about that. Also salary adjustments for benchmarking to job descriptions and industry standards.
Yeah. And if unspent, could also go other places.
Absolutely, yes. And this current budget, just in reference to that, we are budgeting 15,000 to the reserves. I think based on what I've seen in the last several years, and that's hence my comment earlier about any unspent money could be saved to reserves. That seems to be the practice from the last several years. That said, there were significant unspent dollars in the salary lines over the last couple of years, and I am interested in using those to address some of the concerns that the board and I have already talked about. So we can talk about the reserves too. And this also takes into consideration a very conservative look at interest and also passports. So, okay, good discussion. Thank you for the questions. Other questions?
Matt, did you
Okay.
want each line item from version 2 to compare to version 3, what we're seeing
Yeah.
here? That right?
That's what
I
I'm
can read
wondering.
that
Should I?
out.
Yeah, please go ahead. So IMRF.
Oh yeah, IMRF, that is 26, and we increased that to 35 in
Got it.
this draft. Medical insurance, 95 in version 2, increased to 100,000 version 3.
Mhm.
There are 2 salary lines, so I'll give you the first one. Staff salaries. It's actually a small increase. No, it's a small decrease. I just tried to balance better the funds between the admin line and the staff line. So the draft 2 was 385,000. So it's just a slight decrease.
Okay.
And then for the librarian line, it's a slight increase from 215,000, sorry, my brain is off. 215,000 to 220,000.
Understood. Thank you.
The last
Okay.
one, Social Security.
Yep. And so the last one, Social Security increased from 43,000 to 44,000.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
And Renee, just help me understand because one of the biggest changes is IMRF.
Yep. Let me pull that up too. Bettina had that line. Share screen.
It's like a 50% change.
So if you look at the actual numbers that Bettina has delineated for IMRF, the costs she's proposing for 23-24 are 26,856.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm using Bettina's algorithm.
Right, but so 26 was version 2, but version 3 that we just saw, I thought said 35, or did I invert those?
No, you're right.
Let me triple check. Yeah, it's possible I could have over increased. Yep, you're right. Let me make a note to myself. Well, then what I might do is I might propose 30,000 based on the numbers she drafted for us. And then we'd have about 6,000 to reallocate.
Are you currently displaying IMRF fiscal year 24 tab?
I'm sorry. Sometimes what happens is I move around in tabs and then it doesn't show. So I'm looking at the budget proposal, the draft 3.
Okay, so there's 30 in draft 3.
Okay,
Well, there was no, I just changed that
Okay, got it.
based on our conversation. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I need to redistribute out those funds. Thank you. There were very many versions, and I missed that one.
So we were looking at version 3 earlier with 35K, and you've just changed it now to 30K, correct? So it's
correct.
kind of
So
a
I'll
version
need to
4.
redistribute.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I'll need to redistribute. $5,000. Would you like me to keep going to review the other changes?
I think that'd probably be comprehensive. Yeah.
Yep. All right. So building maintenance from version 2. I had budgeted 40. This is a decrease to
Okay.
37, but I mean, I could probably, based on the I had to move things around. I could probably move it back to 40 based on the 5,000. Even more? You want me to add all of it? I mean, there's plenty of work here.
You know, I would say just based on the last 2 months, the 40 is certainly warranted. If there's another place where you'd rather put the 2,000, that's fine. But we are not going to be able to avoid some substantial building maintenance expenses in a building that's 50 years old.
Yes. And I'm interested in various grants through the state that we might be able to get as my capacity hopefully opens up a little bit more. But the webinar I attended today is brick and mortar. The deadline is next week. Not accessible for me at this time, but it was good for me to attend so that I can get a sense of what could be available in future. So,
I mean, another place you could consider putting it is in grounds maintenance, because the village is about to pass an ordinance where gasoline powered leaf blowers and other types of equipment are not going to be able to be used during the majority of the spring and all of the summer and some of the fall. And I'm told that a number of my neighbors, their landscaping companies are increasing their costs substantially. Lucky enough, my lot is very small. We do our own.
Yeah.
And therefore you're
Matt,
exempted
if you have
from.
any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Oh, I have
So-
thoughts. Probably nothing that I want to share in a recorded call, but
So the 8,000 that you see here is an increase from last year, and actually it's the same number from my last version of the budget. But if you'd like, I can we can move the 2,000 or 1,000 even and increase ground maintenance based on that feedback. So already there's an increase of 1,500, which we discussed it, I think, in our first meeting, because of not the leaf blower ordinance, but other increased costs.
Yeah.
Is there support to have this be 9,000 and then have building maintenance be 41? What do you?
I
It
mean,
is also,
having sat on building and grounds for 2 years now, roughly, that's top of my mind, but there may be other things that are top of your mind, Matt, or top of your mind, Renee. It's just, it's a place where I know it's grounded in reality. Let me just put it that way.
yeah.
the
Relate-
top of mind concerns for me are the capital costs, the building maintenance, the grounds maintenance, things like that. So I concur with whatever. I'll defer to whatever judgment we think is appropriate here in terms of allocating that additional 5 between the 2 lines.
Mhm.
What I do want to identify then here too is the increase in miscellaneous expenditures to 3,000. So there is, and that's from this year's budget of 1,000. We're already over budget in our miscellaneous expenditures this fiscal year, just the line itself, not the overall. So I did try to make more room for those unexpected. And then of course, if the board knows about it and there is money that we can allocate elsewhere, we could overspend ground, but Bonnie, go ahead.
One other quick question. I did see that you had increased utilities. It's another thing that kind of nationwide has been, it's increased substantially. Okay.
Yep, and that also includes the cost of the impervious surfaces. I got an estimate from Bettina, the last draft or the draft before that, and then that was higher than what Drew told me most recently, but I didn't change it. I didn't decrease it again. So utilities version 2 was 13, version 2 was 14, and then I changed it to 13. Based on these conversations, do either of you have a recommendation as we're looking at the numbers?
I would pad or gross up the grounds maintenance to 9,000, take the building maintenance to 41. Kind of echoing about Trustee Shaw's recommendation.
What did you say, Bonnie? It cut out for me for a second.
All right, I said that works for me.
Okay. So building maintenance 41, ground maintenance 9,000, utilities 13,000.
I'm getting behind here on my changes on the elevator maintenance. So that
Yeah, we hadn't gotten to that yet. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Good. All right.
Talking about all so the last meeting we had, we talked about the increased costs in elevator maintenance, and I've since received an actual bill saying that it will increase. So this is an increase from 1,600 to 1,750
Thank you.
to help cover those increased costs.
And the grounds maintenance, what was that in version 2?
Version 2, it was 8. So I didn't change it, but now we're changing it. So version 2 from 8 to 9.
Thank you.
Before I forget. So.
And
Okay.
just so we're keeping on pace here, we're 5 minutes to 8 o'clock.
Yeah, and if I can go over 15 minutes, just to help expedite things, I've got to
Do
get
you
my,
have-
yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. Do you have a cutoff at 8, Bonnie?
I'm good to go over 15 minutes.
Okay. So we've discussed utilities already. So going down the other changes from the last version, miscellaneous expenditures. And that, the computer times out here. That is an increase from 2,000 to 3,000 from version 2.
Increase from 2 to 3. Got it.
Correct. Very nominal change. It was really just a numbers game. I had this library furnishings was $6,507. It was the one that had the $7. So I just moved things around a little bit. This is just now 6,000. So from 6,500 to 6,000. And then transferred to reserve. The last version had it 20,000. You can see we're budgeting 16 this year, but it's likely we can put a little bit more. And so with that, I've budgeted to 15,000 in this version. Questions or any discussion?
I feel like the only place where my mind goes back to is the medical insurance, bumping it from 86 to 100.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Yeah, just Matt, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't know that I have an opinion. If Bettina's estimates are roughly 92,000.
That was for the following year. Let me pull it up really quick so you can see it in front of you.
I think it was 83 and change.
Nope. Your insurance summary. So this is what we budgeted this year. She's proposing 83 for next year. And then the 91 would be for the following year, but we have very little information about that.
Right. Yeah, that seems awful high given, I mean, we're almost at a, what, 18% overage?
And so the wiggle room that I am suggesting, which we can talk about, is if we do want to add another staff member, or for example, move one staff member from part-time to more than 30 hours, this gives us some way to prepare for staffing changes that we don't yet know we might need, given the salary benchmarking. I mean, I can share anecdotally with you. We've had a full-time staff member on vacation this week, and one staff person got sick, and we have very, very, very little wiggle room to really adequately staff our desks. And so I would like to continue conversations about staffing. But if we feel that wiggle room is not needed, or that additional funding is not needed for this fiscal year, we can talk about it.
Yeah, so just to be clear, so the original version 2 of not the original, but version 2 of the budget had 95,000 for fiscal year 23-24. Our estimates from the director of the village, from Bettina, are roughly 84,000. We're proposing $100,000 line item in the budget. Does that paraphrase
I
accurately?
mean, that's a good summary. If we were to tightly budget with the existing staff that we have and not planning for any staffing changes or increasing benefits to any staff person or adding a staff person, I think budgeting 87, 85 would be sufficient. We could be tightly budgeted there.
Or we could just hold that line at the 95 in version 2. That gives us another 5,000 in the general funds. It still
Version
gives us
2, yeah.
Yeah, still gives us like a what $11,000 increase over Bettina's estimates, which to me seems like a lot of wiggle room, you know, all else equal, right?
Especially since it gives you some wiggle room for someone to be added to the insurance coverage at some point in the year. You don't have to necessarily budget an increase for the full year. I would argue, and again, to sound a little repetitive, given the age of our building, I'd much rather see us tee up that we're going to put 20 into reserves.
And what we're doing right now is we're just reallocating some of that money we're getting in the current year to building needs without having it bypass reserves and then come back. But yes, that is a huge need as well.
Yeah. So I support 95 for the insurance line item for our proposed budget for next year and add 5 to reserve.
Matt, does that work for you?
That works for me. I think that's reasonable.
And then that goes back to what was my original version for reserves, which was 20. So that works. I think we're in really good shape.
Yep. Okay.
I do too. So, I do too.
Just thank you both. I'm looking at the time. It is 8 o'clock. Matt, thank you for being willing to go a little bit longer. Sure. Are there any final discussion points on the draft budget? So then what I'm going to suggest as next steps for me, I'm going to make sure the recording is uploaded to YouTube tomorrow and then send it out to the Finance Committee and then give the Finance Committee a chance to update themselves on the workings of today's meeting. And then what I'm going to do is send the final draft to everybody via email, BCCing everybody, so that you can familiarize yourselves with it before the March meeting. And then there'll be a formal presentation of the final draft at the March meeting. Does that sound like a good way forward?
Works for me.
Sounds good.
Great. Thank you all. Couple short items to talk about. This is a carryover from the last couple of Finance Committee meetings. There was discussion about a new budget code in BSNA, our accounting software, to more accurately and transparently account for the costs for postage for passport services. And so we've already talked as staff, very supportive of that change. And my recommendation would be to make these updates into BSNA starting May 1, so starting the new fiscal year. And then the other idea that staff had, and I wanted to bring back to you all, was the idea of having a new expenditure line, because I didn't realize we had these things, but for passport service supplies. If it would be helpful for the board to see that transparently identified on the budget, we could have a delineated line specifically for passport supplies, passport service supplies, and things like of this nature. Actually, it's going to come up in the March meeting. I'll talk about it in the expenditure report. Small booklets that we order from the state about driver's license and what to do in order to bring all of the IDs that you need for passport services. It's a minimal cost, but it is a cost. So these booklets, along with other resources we get, envelopes and things for passport as a whole, it would be nice for me, I think, for the library to be able to have a clearer sense of what does this service require in terms of supplies, as opposed to just putting it all in supplies and not really knowing how to sift through that. So that was what staff wanted to recommend. So I'm bringing that to the table for discussion. That would be useful.
I like that idea in the vein of transparency and kind of separating apples from oranges, so that we know thank you very much, our pure passport net income, if you will.
Okay.
Is it a meaningful amount? I mean, is it a rounding error, or is it?
It's more than it's more than 100, and we have budget lines around 100. So, I mean, that's worth asking.
Okay.
And then Renee, what about the postage? Because I think
that would still have its own line.
And that is how many hundreds of dollars, maybe thousands of dollars.
Well, and that's where I think Martha talked about it last month. I'd have to ask her, but it could be like hundreds to thousands, because depending on if we process, there's the revenue, and then there's that we're making from the expedited passports and just all the passports, and then there's the postage that we need to pay up front, and then we get reimbursed. So there would be a line in both the revenue and the expenditures for the postage, passport postage. Sounds like there's support for that. And I think starting with these changes, May 1 would help, just with clarity for all budgeting years. Great, thank you. Moving to the next item, our last item, I want to provide just an overview of the work that I've done to develop a structure for staff recognition. We've had a discussion at finance committee meetings, and also recently the HR committee meeting. And I talked to Bettina today, and I asked her if there was any precedent at the village for any sort of merit base or any sort of bonus or one-time honorarium. And she told me that this is a budgeted item that the village manager budgets every year. Discretionary based on his allocation, an amount that is given annually to select staff. So what I thought would be helpful to note, at least for this meeting, is that there is precedence even within our own village for a one-time or a bonus type of distribution to staff. I know there were some questions and concerns in HR committee meeting and this meeting about, is that done? It's a public library, it's a government institution. And so Bettina and I were talking, and she told me that, so I thought that was worth sharing with you all. So what I am going to propose is a joint meeting of the finance and the HR committee, and this will most likely be entirely executive session, and I will be presenting the structure. And so what I've identified are the different job classes and an amount of money based on that job class in an escalating scale through management. And it would be a one-time payment utilizing this particular fiscal year's funding. And the proposal would be a letter to each individual staff identifying the amount that they are receiving based on some of the things that we've talked about here. Their work keeping the library running for 7 years without it, 7 months, not years, 7 months without a director, and taking on additional work at every level. And congratulations for the Star Library Award recognition that they've received. And so that's what I put together. The largest amount I can just kind of share briefly, have it on this screen here. So the largest amount that would be distributed would be, and of course these are taxed at a higher rate similar to the honorarium that I received in my starting. So this would be paid for out of salary funds, and staff would receive a separate check in this amount for this purpose. So then I would share the structure at this meeting, and the committees would have discussion and decide what to do next.
So quick question for you, Renee. Did Bettina share what maybe the recognition line is at the village relative to the total salary line? You know, is it 2%? Is it 20%? Is it?
No, but I could pop into their board packets and take a look. I can also ask her.
I think that would be a helpful reference.
I'll bring that for that meeting. Absolutely. So this was more just a update. Any further discussion or questions? Okay.
That's great.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
No, I think it's a great initiative. I'm glad we're able to carve that out.
Okay.
So just so I'm clear here, so you'll follow up with a reference point of what amounts or percentages the village uses in their allocation.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll have that presented at the combined finance and HR meeting as part of the proposal for this bonus structure.
Okay.
Thanks, Bonnie. Good recommendation. Any other business for the committee? All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Do
I so move.
I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. We have adjourned the meeting tonight at 8:10. Thank you both so much for coming tonight.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
that was
Renee.
efficient. Yeah, thank you, Renee. I will send these out right now. Please back me up on that they're legible and that they're complete.
Yours were great last time too, so I'm not worried.
Okay. Not always
Thanks,
the best
Matt.
scribe. Yep, my pleasure.
Have a good one.
Good night,
Have a
everyone.
good evening, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.